YouTube fam, it's your boy Jeff Rosado, and I'm finally back with an updated Elemental Throne deck list. So, for those of you who don't know, Elemental Throne is a deck that I created using the threshold producing capabilities of Elementalist. This deck aims to essentially gain as much card advantage and board presence as possible, and it plays a bunch of powerful spells, especially cards that require a bunch of threshold. And essentially, by assembling that strategy, hopefully you're able to produce a substantial amount of board presence, and you're able to make key decisions in order to win the game. If you haven't also noticed, I have this fantastic playmat done by the legendary Séverine Pinois. As you can see, she added some additions to this playmat, adding in a gold fixture to it. It almost looks like gold leaf, but essentially this is just a metallic marker. This is number 35 out of 50. So only 50 of these playmats were ever made, which means that 50 lucky individuals are ever going to own this playmat. And I'm sincerely honored to not only own this very rare playmat, but own this one-of-a-kind AP done by these very talented artists. Thank you both Elvira and Séverine for being able to take part in this channel and support me in ways that I would have never imagined. Again, being able to provide a one-of-a-kind AP and a beautiful playmat so I can compete the realm in style, it just means so much to me. So thank you so much. Without further ado, let's get on into this deck list. So I will start off with my artifacts. I have, of course, the Philosopher's Stone. Being able to make the first spell of each element that I cast cost one less every turn is just phenomenal. Because of Elementalist, we are, of course, playing a bunch of cards that require a bunch of threshold. Having Elementalist to make the threshold costs a little bit easier to work around, and then having Philosopher's Stone to make my spells cost one less is just very important for this deck. I'm also playing Aquamarine Core, Amethyst Core, Ruby Core, and Onyx Core. So all four cores. These are obviously in here to fix threshold and support Elementalist, while also being able to provide mana, so in that way it makes my spell casting a lot easier. So now, getting into my new artifacts, I have Ring of Morrigan. This card is very powerful. The bearer has an ability where if they were to cast a spell, I can deal 1 damage to a target nearby unit, and then I may have the option to gain 1 life. This is awesome because this essentially gives you life gain anytime you cast a spell, and it also guarantees that you're able to deal damage. So this could potentially end the game if your opponent's on death's door. And it's just very simple to always have a spell in your hand. You just have to draw a spell every turn. So yeah, Ring of Morrigan, just very, very powerful. I'm playing 1 Amulet of Niniane. This allows the bearer to not be targeted or damaged by magic, which is just awesome. This essentially is just an out for any type of burn style strategy. But also being able to have this on some of your minions is very important as well. Just being able to prevent them from being targeted. I am also playing the legendary 4 Waters of Paradise. This relic is just absolutely powerful. You sacrifice the 4 Waters, and this turn, the bearer's next elemental spell requires no threshold and also costs 4 less to cast. That is just ridiculous. This is essentially a more upgraded mix, and this just opens up so many ridiculous plays and interactions. The most important artifact in this deck, it is one of the namesakes of the deck, and it is the Immortal Throne. So these 2 cards started it all for me. With Elementalist, I wanted to play this avatar just for the fact that it makes my spells easier to cast, and I wouldn't have to really worry about the threshold cost. while the Immortal Throne says that whenever anyone plays a card with equal cost than the number of level counters on the Immortal Throne, they draw a card and then I add a level to the Immortal Throne. Now, when this is at level 8 or more, an avatar here alone wins the game. So this is essentially a draw engine. As long as you're playing spells that are corresponding to the counters on the Immortal Throne, you're going to draw cards, and you're also going to build up to a point where you might potentially win the game with it. Again, these cards really are just the namesake of the entire deck, and I absolutely love playing both of them. Now, I will address that this card actually did receive an FAQ update, and it did receive a slight nerf. Nothing too devastating, but essentially the thing that we need to notate here is what play a card means. Back in the day, if you played a card like Boneyard or Mother Nature to play a minion from a card effect, as long as that minion's mana cost matched the counters on the Immortal Throne, it would also trigger. And that sparked a bunch of controversy, so much so that we had the FAQ updated a few times with this card. I even went so far as to contact Ira Faye, and I also contacted Eric himself. So now the FAQ reads that anytime you play a site, or anytime you cast a spell, are really the only times when this card will activate and trigger. So essentially that means that whenever you try to bring out a minion from a card effect, it will not trigger the Immortal Throne. But nevertheless, the Immortal Throne is such a powerful card, and it doesn't stop me in the slightest from winning with its win condition. For my minions, these are my 2-cost minions. I added in Sisters of Avalon. This card is pretty good. At first, I wasn't really too fond of it. For 2 mana and 1 power, it has Spellcaster, and it also has the Genesis ability to discard a spell and draw a spell. Now, if you happen to not have any spells to discard, you will still draw a card with this. So that's usually the best time to play this, because essentially you just get a free draw spell. I'm playing Highland Princess. I feel like I have to, because this just allows me to search out my cores, my Philosopher's Stone, Amulet of Niniane, as well as Ring of Morrigan. I am playing the Grim Reaper having lethal, and anytime Grim Reaper kills a minion, you banish that minion and all copies. You search the owner's cemetery, hand, and spellbook for those copies and banish them. Very good card indeed. For my 3-cost minions, I have 4 Apprentice Wizard, Spellcaster, Genesis, draw a spell. Very simple. I absolutely love the artwork, and it is proven to be a wonderful staple in this deck list. A new addition to my deck, another Spellcaster, we have Morgana Le Fay. This card is very, very powerful. It is very taxing on Threshold. It does require 3 Fire Threshold to cast, but for 3 mana and a 3/3 minion, it also has Spellcaster and Stealth. So Spellcaster becomes very handy for its other ability, which is Genesis. Morgana draws her own hand of 3 spells, and she can cast those cards. This is kind of crazy, because this is essentially a player in a form of a card. It's certainly very powerful. See, if you happen to have this with Amulet of Niniane, really this would die easily to Lightning Bolt, because Lightning Bolt would target the site and then deal 3 damage to it, getting around the stealth, because they can't target it because of stealth. But now because of Amulet of Niniane, it can't be damaged by magic, and of course it can't be targeted, but that just means that Firebolt, Magic Missiles, even Chaos Twister cannot kill this card. And it's really good too, because as long as it has stealth, your opponent cannot actually target it for attacks. Really, the only way how you can stop this interaction is if you have something like Roots of Yggdrasil, which destroys everything, and then you have Atlantean Fate and Earthquake. But for, let's say, Atlantean Fate, if this was on an ordinary site that's not a water site, they actually can't submerge this with Atlantean Fate, because it only affects non-ordinary sites. As for Earthquake, if this was on a water site, now the Earthquake cannot burrow this card. So being able to pay attention to what elements your opponent's playing and being able to set this up is just very powerful, and essentially just makes it so you have a body that will always be able to cast its spells, and it provides an absurd amount of card advantage and certainly is annoying to deal with. So I absolutely love the addition to this card in my deck. For my 4-drops, I have 2 Clamor of Harpies, 2 Selfsame Simulacrum, 1 Ruler of Thule, and a new addition, Sir Bedivere. Clamor of Harpies is phenomenal, just being able to have 3 power and airborne, but also having the Genesis ability to target a weaker minion, teleport it to this location, and then a Clamor of Harpies may strike it. It's just really good. Essentially, when this comes in play, this will guarantee that you're going to strike a weaker minion in play, and you can also choose to strike it. So for example, there is some interactions where you can use the Clamor of Harpies to teleport your weaker minion to that location, and you can choose not to strike it. Use that information however you feel like you need to, but essentially this does provide some neat interactions to this deck, while also being able to be a body that provides pressure on your opponent. Now, we have Selfsame Simulacrum, a wonderful card being able to come and play as a basic copy of any nearby minion. So this card actually copies the text box and everything that's printed on the card, which is phenomenal. It's really good for whenever you're copying Morgana Le Fay or any of these other Genesis abilities, just to gain as much card advantage as you can. It's also really good too because you can copy your very powerful minions as well as your opponent's minions as well. It does require a bit of knowledge and timing to use this card correctly, but in the right hands, it is a phenomenal minion. And it also gets over the rarity restriction. So for example, if I happen to use this to copy Ruler of Thule, I can potentially have 3 copies of Ruler of Thule as long as I'm able to copy them. The same can go for Clamor of Harpies, Apprentice Wizard, Morgana Le Fay, what say you? Card's really, really good for various different situations. Speaking of Ruler of Thule, this guy is phenomenal for closing out games. Having charge and having 3 power is great, but he also allows allies to move as if the top and bottom edges of the realm are connected. Other allies occupying those sites there have +1 power. So essentially, this guy can be summoned, and then he can attack on the other edge of the realm as if it were connected. And the fact that he says allies too makes it so that your avatar can also attack and also gain a power boost as long as it's on the top and bottom edges. This deck does play a few weak minions, but with Ruler of Thule, he certainly packs a punch and is able to increase their power. Very powerful for closing out games. So Sir Bedivere. At first, I wasn't too impressed with this card until I test played it, and I took back everything I said before about it. This card is just amazing. So it does have a split power and defensive power of 3 and 4. It requires 2 Earth Threshold and 1 Water Threshold, so he is a bit taxing on Threshold, but again, we're not really too worried about that. Really, his ability shines if Sir Bedivere is carrying an artifact at the start of your turn, you draw a card. So essentially, this guy can draw you 2 cards every turn. You can have Philosopher's Stone on the Elementalist, cast all your spells, get the discount from the Philosopher's Stone, and then when you're done casting your spells, before you end your turn, you can drop the Philosopher's Stone, have Sir Bedivere pick up the Philosopher's Stone, and now on your following turn, since he's carrying an artifact at the start of your turn, now you can draw 2 spells. But here's the best part. After you draw the benefit from Sir Bedivere, you can use him to drop the Philosopher's Stone and have your avatar pick it up again. Now you can repeat the process. You can cast spells, get the discount, and when you're done, you can still drop the artifact and have Sir Bedivere pick it up. It is a little tedious to do it this way, but being able to draw 2 cards every turn is just backbreaking for your opponent. So now for my 5 drops. So I have 3 Dapperel Vampire. This is just wonderful for having the ability to gain life anytime she strikes something. And also having Airborne makes it a very difficult card to interact with in terms of your opponent trying to target it for attacks and whatnot. I have 2 Hounds of Ondoros, This is basically just as good as Dapper Vampire. It is just a little bit more annoying to deal with. So this elite beast has Airborne, Burrowing, Submerge, and Voidwalk. So that means that this card can essentially exist anywhere in the realm. And as an added bonus, this card says nearby enemies permanently lose stealth. So if my opponent happens to have their own Morgana Le Fay or just any other annoying minion with stealth, the hounds will sniff it out and they will lose that ability. It is a very phenomenal minion to play with, and it is very difficult for my opponent to handle. Another very difficult minion to deal with is Questing Beast, and I absolutely love this card. Having 5 power and lethal and stealth is already just absurd as it is, but it has the ability where at the end of your turn, Questing Beast may take a step, and that's just really great because at the end of the turn when it comes in play, you essentially are able to get into your opponent's territory right off the bat, and the fact that it has stealth makes it very difficult to target, and then having lethal just guarantees that no matter what it fights, it's killing regardless. It's a very powerful minion indeed. And these are essentially just the heavy hitters of the deck. These are really what you want to try and get out as quickly as you can to finish the game off. Now, for the last 2 5 costs I have, these are very complex minions. They are Courtesan Thias and Vivian the Enchantress. So Courtesan Thias is essentially a card that should just end the game when it enters play, because it has the ability where Genesis, during their next turn, each player is controlled by the previous one. So being able to control my opponent on their turn is already really nice, but it's very devastating for them because I get to control them first. Now, if you time Courtesan Thias correctly, if you have certain cards in your hand where your opponent doesn't want you to play them, cards like Apprentice Wizard or Grandmaster Wizard, ideally you can potentially just use this where you can essentially skip their turn. So you play this, disrupt your opponent. On your turn, they're going to have a difficult choice and they don't want you to gain card advantage, so they're not really going to play your wizards to give you more spells. It just doesn't seem right. So the best time to use this is when your opponent's on death's door, you play Courtesan Thias, and if their avatar just happens to be nearby any of your minions, you can essentially force their avatar to attack your minion, and as long as that minion has at least 1 power, it'll be enough to end the game before your opponent even has a chance to control you on the following turn. There are just so many complex interactions with this card. I can't provide all the combos that this card presents because I feel as though there's still combos that we have yet to discover with this card. But just keep in mind that this card is ideally just an advantage for you to disrupt your opponent, and just be very careful when you play this. Plan ahead so that way it doesn't disrupt you on the following turn. Vivian the Enchantress. So this card is just very ridiculous. So for starters, for 5 mana and 1 power, and also 3 Earth Threshold, this card is a hefty cost to play, but its ability is just absurd. So Vivian has all printed abilities of all avatars and spellcasters in the realm wherever she is. So what that means is when Vivian is in your deck, in your hand, in your cemetery, and even in the realm, she will have these printed abilities. And what's insane is that when we're playing avatar like Elementalist, when we're playing Vivian the Enchantress, she will also gain Elementalist's threshold producing capabilities, and essentially gives us 2 of every threshold. Now, if we're able to just cast this for 3 Earth, ideally that's not very important, but what's very interesting is that this card can also copy your opponent's avatar's abilities. So for example, if your opponent happens to have Sorcerer or Death Speaker, you can use Vivian to tap to draw a spell from Sorcerer's ability, or you can use Death Speaker's ability to cast minions from your cemetery, which is just absolutely insane. I was able to use this card to copy my opponent's Death Speaker, and because I was able to do that, I was able to cast a Death Dealer from my cemetery, and that was able to win me the game with the Immortal Throne. So this card provides so many complex interactions. There's even a bunch of controversy going around that this card can provide infinite loops for the game. I don't really know how I feel about that, but Ideally, I just hope that the people at Eric's Curiosa can provide an FAQ that will help us understand and limitate this card's broken potential. For my 6 costs, nothing really too impressive here. I just have 2 Grandmaster Wizard. This just comes in play and draws me 3 spells. Enough said. I wanted to play more 6 cost spells, but I felt as though 2 is enough. 7 costs, I have Death Dealer, Ancient Dragon, and these cards, of course, are just here to be the finishers of the game with Immortal Throne, but also adds very interesting interactions. Ancient Dragon is just a powerful minion in the form of Airborne and having 6 power, and being able to tap it to deal 4 damage to each nearby unit at a target location nearby is just very good. Potentially, I can use its tap ability to deal 4 damage to my opponent's nearby avatar and potentially kill them if they're on death's door. The legendary Death Dealer essentially just comes in play and kills all other minions. It doesn't matter if they're in the void, if they're submerged, if they're burrowed, whatever. This card kills all minions in play. For my last minion in the deck, it is the Great Old One, sitting at 8 mana, 3 water threshold, and a whopping 16 power. Having Submerge is very important because its Genesis ability permanently floods the entire realm, including voids. So essentially this turns all sites into water sites. If a new site comes in play that replaces the void, it will also gain a water threshold. And this just means that this card will be able to be submerged anywhere, and it's just really, really good. Play your cards right, and you might be able to play this on the second turn. Now I'm going into my magics. I have 1 Browse, 1 Dream Quest, and 1 Immolation here. So Browse is just really great for being able to look at the next 7 spells. I choose one of them to go to my hand, and the rest go in the bottom of my spellbook in any order. This is basically simple. You use it to the best advantage you possibly can. Yeah, that's basically it. Dream Quest is phenomenal. I don't care what anyone says. This card is just insane, right? Of course, you can play Common Sense, but I love Dream Quest way better for so many reasons. So for starters, an allied spellcaster falls asleep, and it is disabled until it's hurt. At the start of my next turn, if my spellcaster is asleep, I wake it up, and then I search my spellbook for any card and add it to my hand. Everyone says, oh, well, they could just deal damage to your spellcaster and fizzle the Dream Quest. I actually would prefer that more than searching the card, and this is why. If my opponent only has a certain amount of cards in their hand, and if they're targeting a weaker spellcaster, that's wonderful, because now that spell that they use on my weaker spellcaster can't be used against a bigger minion that I'm playing. So I really do not care if they waste a removal spell to kill an Apprentice Wizard. Cool. I already drew a spell off of it. I already gained the advantage. And this is just a way of just making my Apprentice Wizard essentially a lightning rod. And a lot of people don't really realize that. They just think, oh, well, they could just fizzle the Dream Quest. But again, that is fine. I would prefer them to waste their spell on my weaker minion, so then that way they're not targeting any of my stronger minions. I have Immolation, just a wonderful removal spell. Dealing 7 damage to a target minion nearby is just really good. It is heavy on the threshold, but it is wonderful because almost every minion that we've had so far has been less than 7 power. So Immolation is almost guaranteed to kill any minion. So yeah, I absolutely love those 1-cast spells. For my 2 cost, really it's fairly simple. I just only have Lightning Bolt. Deal 3 damage to a random unit at a target location. So this is wonderful for getting rid of Morgana Le Fay. If they happen to have it, it gains stealth, whatever. This can target the location, not the Morgana, and then it will deal 3 damage to it. So it is a way of how to get around stealth units. It's also really good against Phase Assassin because if they happen to play it in the void nearby your avatar, you can play a site right under the Phase Assassin to get it out of the void, and now you can use Lightning Bolt to target that new location, and it will deal 3 damage to it. Of course, everyone plays other burn spells in the form of Firebolts and Magic Missiles, but I still feel like, in my opinion, Lightning Bolt is far more superior. My 3 cost, I have 3 grapple shot. This is just allowing my bigger minions to essentially strike twice while also closing in distance. It's also really good for finishing off the game as well. And of course, Lightning Bolt is just as good for doing that too. So if my opponent's on death's door, I have ways to guarantee that that damage will go through without my opponent having to intercept or block, etc. It's also really good too with Dapro Vampire, because if Dapro Vampire is able to strike twice, I essentially heal twice, and I can potentially gain 8 life. And of course, with Great Old One, if I use Great Old One to attack for 16 damage, I can use the grapple shot, close into distance, putting them on death's door. For my forecast, I have 2 Chaos Twister, forecast, and I have Pact with the Devil. So Chaos Twister is a very interesting card. It is also very technical. I place a target minion on the back of my hand, at least 1 foot, and then in one breath, I blow the minion off my hand, and wherever it lands, it will deal damage to itself and any other unit at that location. So this has some very uncontrollable interactions sometimes. Sometimes you'll blow the card off and it won't land where you want it to, or it may land in various different locations. Just use the best advantage point that you can. Whichever this has the more coverage on, it will apply its effect on that site or location. It's also really good against Death Speaker decks because you can possibly blow the minion in the void, and if it's in the void, it'll just be banished, which is phenomenal because that means that Death Speaker won't be able to get it back. Be very careful though. If this happens to land on your cards, it will deal damage to your cards as well. And if this happens to land on your avatar, you may also suffer some damage. But really, the worst part about this card is when you blow it off and it falls off the playmat. See, these squares are supposed to identify a location and identify the coverage of the Chaos Twister ability. But if this happens to fall off the mat, the ability fizzles and you essentially just paid 4 mana for nothing. So practice your Chaos Twister. I practiced this card for way too long to know that I have a specific strategy in mind on how to always land this. I do have a Chaos Twister tutorial video in case you want to learn more on how to actually play this card. So I definitely recommend you checking that out. So Pact with the Devil. You essentially sacrifice the caster, or you can choose to lose half your life rounding up. And if you do, you draw all 3 cards. And of course, the cost really doesn't matter as long as you're able to progress the game and get to where you need to for victory. For the last card in the deck, it is a 5 cost, and it is Atlantean Fate. I was originally test playing with Poison Nova, but I felt like Atlantean Fate was just far better. So Atlantean Fate says, affected non-ordinary sites are flooded. They are water sites and only provide water threshold. They also lose all other abilities, which is just insane. Being able to strip your opponent of their threshold and also forcing them to play water is just really good if they're not a water-based deck. But also being able to have their sites lose abilities is just ridiculously powerful. It also has the Genesis ability to submerge all minions and artifacts on top of the affected sites. So the fact that it turns those sites into water sites and it also submerges whatever's at those locations is just so powerful. This can potentially also work with Great Old One, because if you flood the entire realm with Great Old One, now when you play this, it doesn't matter if your opponent has ordinary sites or not, because they are already flooded, which means that you're more than guaranteed to submerge whatever is necessary on those sites. And yeah, this can potentially be a board sweep. It also disrupts your opponent's mana base, and as well as submerge very important artifacts that they're playing. Alright, and now for the Atlas. Of course, I'm playing the Color Out of Space, most powerful site in the game, being able to provide 1 of each threshold, ideally only as long as it's adjacent to the void. See, if it's not adjacent to the void, its ability says that it provides no mana or threshold, and so forth. So having this on the first turn with Elementalist is really powerful, because ideally when you play it right here, you have multiple void squares to always guarantee that it has its threshold and mana, And then with Elementalist also producing one of each threshold, you essentially have 2 of each threshold at the very start of the game. It's very powerful. It's one of my favorite interactions, and this site is certainly one of the better sites in the game. Now for our new additions in the deck, we have 1 Joyous Garde, Tentacle, Carleon Upon Usk, and then Glastonbury Tor. So essentially these sites are tri-threshold sites, but ideally they almost work similar in Colorado space in terms of positioning. These will only provide mana in threshold if they're on your back row. So if they're on the very starting row right here, you're able to gain 1 of each threshold that it provides, but it also now provides you mana. So either of these are really great to start the game off with at the beginning of the game, because this will essentially give us as much threshold as we possibly want, so in that way we can continue on with our strategy. These sites are very powerful for that sake. I have 1 Boneyard, the Geistwood, and Vaults of Zul. Boneyard, just being able to revive minions at its location when it's played, is just phenomenal. We have the Geistwood. Genesis abilities here also become Deathrite abilities. We have so many Genesis abilities in our deck. And it's also really good for a neat little combo that I also discovered and invented. You have Grandmaster Wizard as well as Pact with the Devil. And as long as you have this combo, essentially, when you play Grandmaster Wizard, you'll draw 3 spells from its Genesis ability. So, being able to have Pact with the Devil, you use it to sacrifice the caster. You'll not only draw 3 spells from the Pact with the Devil, but because this is dying on the Geistwood, it's marked for death, and its Genesis ability now becomes a Deathrite ability, and you'll draw 3 spells. So these 3 cards alone will draw you 9 cards. It's a very powerful engine, and it allows you to see more cards in your deck. Vault Azul is also another site that lets you draw 3 cards. If an avatar stops here for the first time in the game, that avatar skips their next turn, but you draw 3 cards. It is very risky. If you're playing against faster decks, ideally you want to be very careful when you want to activate this, but it's also just really good for the sheer fact that you're able to see more cards in your deck. So if you're going up against a slower paced deck, it might be worth skipping a turn as long as you have a phenomenal board presence. These sites are very powerful, and I absolutely love them in this deck. Also uniques, but also very powerful in their own right, I have Kingdom of Agartha, Pillar of Zeros, and the new Wormlow Tump. So Kingdom of Agartha with 3 threshold, all minions have burrowing. And this is really good if my opponent has something like Root Spider, because essentially I can play a Clamor of Harpies burrowed underneath the Kingdom of Agartha, and then by doing so I can use its Genesis ability to target their Root Spider underground to this location and then strike it, which is just phenomenal. I can also use Kingdom of Agartha in other ways too, where if I happen to have an Apprentice Wizard, and if I happen to play underground, I can use my Apprentice Wizard to now cast a Lightning Bolt underground, thus killing the annoying Root Spider. It is very weird to think that a Lightning Bolt is being cast underground, but I do love the fact that Sorcery provides us those neat interactions. Pillar of Zeros is really in here just to gain life and also counteract Death Speaker as well. It has Genesis, and it banishes all dead minions, and I heal 1 life for each one. This is also really good with Pact with the Devil, because if there's a sufficient amount of minions in a cemetery, you can use Pact with the Devil, pay half your life, draw 3 spells, and then if you follow up with Pillar of Zeros, you could potentially just replenish your life total back to 20, as if the Pact with the Devil even had any sort of effect on you. So Pillar of Zeros is really good. Wormlow Tump, this is a really good answer against Death Speaker as well, because this prevents your opponent from affecting cards in your cemetery. This is also really good against Raise Dead, because now they can't affect any of your minions to resurrect. I love the fact that all 3 of these sites provide Earth Threshold, and it's very easy to assemble these 2 sites' threshold cost, because of course we have Elementalist. If we play either of these, that'll provide the 2nd Earth Threshold. And now if we have an Onyx Core or any of our tri-sites, we essentially automatically have our thresholds. So now anytime that we play these, they're active and live. Neat little interactions for certain situations, but definitely good cards nevertheless. I think that this is by far the most important site in the game right now, and it's stirring up a bunch of controversy in terms of rulings. We have Smokestacks of Gnoc. So this card says all other nearby sites lose their abilities. This card is ridiculous because it actually combos with all of these sites we presented earlier. Because essentially, these sites have to be played in a certain location in order for us to gain and provide mana and threshold. But with Smokestacks of Gnoc, we actually negate its ability and remove its text box. So now it doesn't matter where we place this. We can play this right here, and this will still provide us mana and threshold. And the same with the Color Out of Space and all of these other sites. So this site is just very powerful for that neat little interaction. So yeah, Smokestacks of Gnoc is just very powerful, and it also provides us red threshold, which also comes in handy from time to time. And it's also just really good against Sinkhole. See, if you play Sinkhole and disrupt your opponent and then follow up with a Smokestacks, it's very annoying for your opponent because now they not only lost this site, but now they also can't really deal with this. Because this says all other nearby sites, your opponent can't really play their Sinkhole anywhere to where they can target this. See, if they played a Sinkhole here, Sinkhole's range is only nearby, which means that it's far away from the Smokestacks. If they play a Sinkhole here, which is nearby to Smokestacks, well, that's unfortunate for them because now they lose that Sinkhole's ability. So this site is very annoying to deal with. There is also a bunch of controversy as to what happens when two Smokestacks are near each other. I usually just go by the FAQ for King of the Realm, whereas the second card played, if they're both passive abilities, the second one will take precedence. So ideally, if yours is already in play, and if they play a second Smokestacks, that Smokestacks should take priority and negate this Smokestacks abilities. So yeah, Smokestacks is just a very ridiculous card, and it's a very good out to very annoying sites that your opponent may have. Another annoying site is Fields of Camlin. With 3 fire threshold, it has Genesis. Each player selects one of their minions and then kills the rest. So this can become very annoying if you only have one minion but your opponent has multiple. They will essentially have a hard choice and they have to keep one minion alive. So this is essentially a board sweep that's just for free. I think that this is too good, and other people might agree with me as well. Having a board sweep that's just for free essentially is just very powerful. Now, another board sweep that we have, and it's probably another annoying site, is Roots of Yggdrasil. So if this site is destroyed, it destroys everything. You do have to destroy it in order to get its ability, but there's certain ways how you can make that happen. So yeah, I would agree that these are the most annoying sites in the game currently, and it's just absolutely crazy that I'm able to play all 3 of them in this deck. Not only making my deck stronger, but also making it more versatile against certain matchups. I have Mirror Realm. These sites are always going to be beneficial so long as you have the right timing for them. And Mirror Realm is great for just replicating that timing. See, because Mirror Realm will come and play as a copy of any site that's nearby. So if I wanted to copy my Color Out of Space, or my Fields of Camlin, or if I wanted to copy this other site that I'm about to show you, Sinkhole, this can potentially become a multiple copy. And ideally, I just love being able to copy Sinkhole with this. Sinkhole is a site that says sacrifice it to destroy a nearby site. It's very simple, but this card has so much interaction with it that I literally can write a book on it. This card, I think, has more interaction than any card in the entire game, and I strictly stand by that. A lot of people don't understand the potential of this card, and it's probably because they haven't played with it that much, but I played with this card before Alpha was even released, and the interactions that this card provides is just ridiculous. If you time this card right, you can essentially put your opponent so far back to the point where it's crippling. And of course, it being an elite in a 30 card Atlas makes it a little difficult to get to. So having a mirror realm that could potentially become a second copy or third copy is very good. For our other elite site, we have 2 Wizard's Den. So this card is very good. It has a Genesis ability where you draw a spell, and then you discard a spell the first time this card is attacked successfully. So there is a lot of controversy with this card as well, and I guess it could be interpreted depending on who the player is. But with smokestacks, right? See, this is a Genesis ability that draws you a spell, and then it has a negative ability if it's first attacked successfully. So some people interpret it as if you play a smokestacks nearby this site, before your opponent has a chance to strike it successfully, this would negate that ability. Now, I'm not saying that is exactly correct. There is no updated FAQ on this interaction just yet. There's only league interpretations and there's interpretations from other players. But some people are saying that when this comes in play, you draw a spell, and the other ability is a addition to the Genesis ability that's tracked by the game. So in other words, even if you play smokestacks nearby this, even if your opponent strikes it, its Genesis ability has already activated, so you still would discard a spell from it. Now, it is very weird to interpret it too, because you can also say this is a Genesis ability, you draw a spell, and the second ability is just a passive ability that happens when it's attacked. Again, nothing specifies this exact interaction right now, and that's why it's causing so much controversy. I would definitely like Eric's Curiosa to update the FAQ so that way we can understand fully how this interaction goes. Does the second ability get negated from smokestacks, or does it not? That's really what it comes down to. But nevertheless, even if this interaction is complex, ask your judge at your event and they'll be able to help guide you on which ruling they feel like is efficient for this interaction. And regardless, no matter what outcome, even when you're discarding a spell from this, drawing a spell just from playing a site is just very strong. And if you play this in a certain spot, you can potentially prevent your opponent from even attacking this, making it much more difficult for them to get the benefit from you discarding a spell. So just keep in mind, we do need a FAQ update for this card, but at the same time, it is wonderful for being able to draw a spell. For my exceptionals, we have Oasis, Lighthouse, Ruins, Windmill, Step, and Aqueduct. So these are the 6 dual sites that are present in Sorcery, and they allow us to fix our threshold. These are also really good with smokestacks because we don't have to worry about their abilities being negated. Ideally, we just only want them for the threshold. And just being able to see so many of them early in the game is wonderful. Now, I will say, we do have a second copy of Oasis because I do feel like Oasis is certainly the more important site in the deck. For me, I always felt like I wanted triple red and I wanted triple water as quickly as I could. Because ideally, we do have a lot of triple earth in our deck. But again, if we have Elementalists and at least one of these, and let's say, for example, we wanted to activate Kingdom of Agartha or Wormlow Tum, they provide us our third earth threshold anyways for their ability. So we technically don't need more of these earth threshold producing sites. So I do like just only having one of each for certain interactions. But ideally, I do want to prioritize fire and water. Of course, air is very important as well. But if we do happen to have a lighthouse with Elementalists, we essentially can cast anything at that point. So again, only really wanted to prioritize the Oasis for these. Now for our last sites, we are playing 4 towers. We have Gothic Tower, Dark Tower, and Lone Tower. So each of these sites, even though they have different names, they essentially have the same ability. Where Genesis, if it enters play, if this is the only copy that you control, you gain 2 mana this turn, which is great. Now I know I said that we're playing 4 towers, and you only see 3. But, surprise, we actually have a 4th tower in the form of Merlin's Tower. This card is Very, very powerful. So for 3 air, it has the Genesis ability where this turn only, this site gains the ability Spellcaster, and the next spell that it casts costs 3 less. That is just absolutely powerful. If we're trying to play a Chaos Twister, we essentially play it for free, because if we're using Merlin's Tower to cast it, Merlin's Tower will give it the discount of 3, but because Merlin's Tower is a site and also grants us 1 mana, that will also allow us to get the 4th mana that we need to cast Chaos Twister. And if we happen to have all 3 air just to activate this ability, we'll already have the threshold requirements for a Chaos Twister. Best part is that Merlin's Tower also allows us to cast the spell underground, which is so versatile. I can use the Chaos Twister, cast it underground, and then now I can get rid of a Root Spider. I can get rid of just anything that's burrowed or submerged, and that allows me to also have interactions with Lightning Bolt as well. One of my favorite things to do is use Pact with the Devil with Merlin's Tower. So of course I do have to make sure I have the double red threshold to make this happen, but Merlin's Tower will make Pact with the Devil cost 3 less, and of course Merlin's Tower also provides its own mana, making it 4. Now, since this has Spellcaster this turn, I can actually use the Pact with the Devil to sacrifice the Merlin's Tower and then draw 3 cards. That is real value right there. Again, like just being able to play a site and essentially cast this for free to just draw 3 cards is great. Yeah, sure, I'll lose a site, but if I'm already ahead on mana, if I'm already ahead on board presence, there's just no way how I'm not going to turn down the opportunity to use this interaction. Merlin's Tower is certainly a very interesting site, and is definitely a staple in my deck for sure, and I love the interaction that it provides. So guys, there you have it. This is my updated Elemental Throne deck list. I hope that you guys enjoyed this updated list. I know that there are so many interactions and so many combos that you can do with this deck. As a matter of fact, I'd like to showcase a few of those combos right now. So I'd like to go over my turn 2 Great Old One combo. This was what I used on my opponent the other day, and at first when I drew this hand, I wasn't really thinking that it was going to be a turn 2 Great Old One. See, I actually ended up drawing into Boneyard, and that's how I was able to get this combo off. So first thing I did was played a tower, generating me 2 mana, played Sisters of Avalon to discard Great Old One. Then I was able to draw a spell for free. So now on the following turn, essentially what I did was play Boneyard, brought back the Great Old One, and since it was so early in the game, my opponent didn't even have a minion to bring back on their behalf. But now on the 3rd turn, it was devastating for my opponent because, again, they still didn't even have a minion out in play. I was able to play a site. I was able to use Great Old One to attack their site for 16, and then with my 3 mana, I used Grapple Shot, putting them on Death's Door. And then from there, they just surrendered because they just had no out to the Great Old One. So this was probably the most powerful play I've ever done with this deck, next to OTKing my opponent with Immortal Throne. Next combo involves Highland Princess with the Geistwood. Ideally, I had the Geistwood, play Highland Princess, use her ability to search Ring of Morrigan. I was able to cast Ring of Morrigan on my avatar, and it doesn't matter which spell you have as long as you're able to cast it, because now when I cast it, the Ring of Morrigan was able to deal 1 damage to my Highland Princess, also gaining me 1 life. But now since the Highland Princess was marked for death on the Geistwood, her Genesis ability now became a Deathrite ability, which means that I was able to fetch out a Philo Stone as well. So this is a neat little interaction for being able to activate her ability twice with just 1 interaction with Ring of Morrigan, and then also getting out a Philosopher Stone as well. So the next combo I wanted to showcase was just with Morgana Le Fay. There was a time where I played her and I drew these spells with her hand. It wasn't really like substantial, but at the same time, it was definitely a neat little interaction. So what I did was I had her cast Amulet of Niniane, and then I used Dream Quest to actually have her fall asleep. So a neat little interaction here. So Amulet of Niniane means that she can't be targeted or damaged by magic, but Dream Quest doesn't target. But there is a little downside because Dream Quest will disable her and she will lose the stealth. And I believe she'll lose the ability to cast as grapple shot. But nevertheless, because of the amulet, she couldn't be targeted or damaged by magic anyways. So my opponent didn't really have a minion to attack her, and they couldn't target her with any damage spells, which was phenomenal. Because on my next turn, she woke up. I was able to get the Dream Quest ability to search for whatever card I wanted, and now Morgana Le Fay was all set to go from there. So in a way, this is a kind of neat little trick of how to use Dream Quest to almost guarantee that it's going to go off. And yes, unfortunately, she will lose the stealth with it, but if you play your cards right, and if you get a card that you really care for, it could be a very useful mechanic for sure. So next combo I wanted to showcase is a little technical, but it is certainly a powerful one at that. It really just is particular because you really just have to have Philosopher's Stone and you have to have a bunch of mana present. It's also really good too if you happen to have 4 Waters of Paradise. But let's just say, for example, we didn't have these and we just had enough mana to not only play Immortal Throne, but everything out at the same time. Because ideally what you want to do is play a site, particularly a Merlin's Tower, generating the first counter on the Immortal Throne, drawing a card. Now with that mana, you'll use it to cast Philostone, also triggering the Immortal Throne, drawing a card. Now if you have enough mana, you play the 4 Waters of Paradise, triggering the Immortal Throne again, drawing an additional card, and then using the 4 Waters to just help our situation out. We can use it to have our next spell cost 4 less, so now we can play an Apprentice Wizard, thus triggering the Immortal Throne to draw a card, but now the Apprentice Wizard will also trigger drawing us another spell. And here's the best part. So now, since that Merlin's Tower has become a spellcaster, and it also makes our next spell cost 3 less, while also providing mana, we could use Pact with the Devil to sacrifice Merlin's Tower as a cost. Since this is 4, we also trigger the Immortal Throne, but now we also trigger Pact with the Devil, allowing us to draw 3 cards. I know that this is a very specific situation, but this is a situation that I have actually done before, and that's why I'm sharing these combos with you. I'm not sharing these as what if. I'm only sharing these because I've actually experienced these combos firsthand, and I was able to do these amazing things with this deck. I mean, again, with this interaction, you're able to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards that you drew from this interaction. The Immortal Throne is now at its 5th counter because you've made it all the way to that. And hopefully within these spells, you'll have a 5-drop, a 6-drop, and a 7-drop to facilitate a win with the Immortal Throne. Again, it's nowhere near as awesome as my OTK video. If you haven't checked that out, definitely go check it out. Of course, now the OTK is obsolete because of the new Immortal Throne's rulings, but nevertheless, even if you can't win in one turn with it now, just being able to draw so many cards in one turn is just absolutely insane, and it can turn the game around just completely. Okay guys, I know that this was a long video, but I felt as though I needed to share as many interactions as I possibly can with this deck. Again, I feel as though there are interactions that I have yet to discover with this list, and that's what's so exciting about this deck. Every game is going to be different. You're going to have so many powerful plays after powerful plays, and just being able to make the right decision, it's just so entertaining, and that's what makes me just love this deck. Now, of course, the beauty of Elementalist is that you can play it any way you want. I'm not out here trying to say this is a deck that everyone needs to play, but what the message of today is that you should be playing what you enjoy the most, and that's all that matters. As long as you're having fun, and as long as you're playing the cards that you want to play, you're going to do good. And eventually you're going to learn interactions over time, and you'll make stricter decisions on your deck building, as well as stricter decisions during your gameplay. Anyways, I absolutely love this deck. I think that this is going to be a deck that I'm going to be piloting for as long as the game exists. And as long as the game continues, I'll also have new interactions to play with. This is the deck that I will be piloting at SorceryCon Las Vegas. If you're attending the SorceryCon, and if you happen to see me, definitely pull me to the side and say, hey, it would mean a lot to me, and I certainly have a lot planned for the event. So for starters, I have this fantastic playmat, purely white, and obviously you can see my signature here, but what's the purpose of it? You see, at SorceryCon Las Vegas, we're going to have so many legendary and talented artists there, and we're going to have so many content creators, as well as the man, the myth, the legend himself, Eric Olofsson, the creator of Sorcery. And of course, his team from Eric's Curiosa is also going to be there. So my goal is to hopefully meet each and every one of them and have them sign this playmat. I really want the memories there to be well worth it. And if you're a content creator, or if you're a part of the team, and if you're watching this video, definitely come find me, because I'd love to etch your signature into this playmat for the history of the game. And I just think that it's going to turn out amazing. So I wanted to record this so you guys can see what the playmat looks like now. And hopefully when I return from Vegas, you guys will be able to see the final end result. I also wanted to showcase this with you guys. So this is a deck box from Ultimate Guard. This is not a sponsor from them or anything, but I wanted to show you guys because we're getting a new deck increase with both the Atlas and the Spellbook. And I believe that this is a wonderful deck box for being able to fit all these cards. So I have my cards double sleeved. This is a Dragon Shield. I believe it's called Justice. So it's silver, but on the inside, the framing is black, and that's so that you can't see through the cards. And the outer sleeve here is KMC. So this is a KMC oversleeve. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them at TCG Player. What say you? And yeah, I believe that when the time comes for us to have increased deck sizes, we're going to need as much space as possible, and we're going to be able to need this space to hold double-sleeved cards to protect our cards. So look, I even have space for my tokens here, I have space for my Rubble tokens and my Atlas. So this is phenomenal. It's definitely well worth the price, and it's certainly a really nice product. It also stands up right here. It has its own little dice tray. So I have my own little measuring tape here, and this is so I can perform my Chaos Twister properly at the right height. I of course have my dice here, and this is just a really nice product. So I highly recommend this for any new player that's looking to get into the game, but also knowing which deck box to get to fit their cards in. So anyways, guys, that's it for this video. I know that there was a lot to share in this, but I really hope that I get to meet some of you guys at SorceryCon Las Vegas. And again, if you see me, definitely pull me to the side, and hopefully you'll be able to sign this awesome playmat. Or maybe we can play some games and maybe shoot some YouTube clips. It's totally up to you. I hope to meet you all there. And for those of you not attending, I will definitely be doing a vlog for content to provide what you guys are missing out on. As always, if you like this video, leave it a thumbs up and give it a like. Comment, share, subscribe, do whatever you feel like you can to support this channel, because without you guys, there would be no channel. And yeah, I will continue to provide as much content as I possibly can. I love you guys, stay safe, and as always, have an awesome week.